WIS Awareness, coming together 1 year later.
Good morning and thank you for joining us for Awareness. I'm your host, Megan Norman. 1 year ago today, we were in a very different place. July 10th, 2015, around 10 a.m., the Confederate flag came down. The flag flew on the State House grounds for more than 50 years, first on the dome and the last 15 years on a flagpole by the Confederate monument. In a few short minutes, the flag was furled. Later that afternoon, the flagpole was gone too. Over the next few days, the concrete slab broken up in pieces and new grass planted. The symbol and any remnants removed, but not before weeks of contentious debate with protests on both sides of an emotional issue.
I don't believe it should have been removed. It's part of history. You can't take history away.
They know what the heritage really is.
They were fighting to keep, their ability to maintain slavery. That's part of the story.
When I look into the eyes of some of the older people who've been through civil rights and the relief and the pain and the years of frustration that they've felt walking by that flag, it's not right, it's not fair.
It was tragic what happened in Charleston, very tragic. I mean, he was a deranged person, but the flag didn't do it.
A split state divided on the issue of heritage versus hate, and an at times heated back and forth in the General Assembly, lasting well into the night before lawmakers finally voted to remove the flag. The tide turning in part because of an impassioned speech by Representative Jenny Horn.
I cannot believe that we do not have the heart in this body to do something meaningful, such as take a symbol of hate off these grounds on Friday.
The NAACP lifted its economic sanctions. The NCAA lifted its restrictions on postseason play. The flag will eventually be displayed in the South Carolina Confederate Relic Room and Military Museum. 3 weeks before the flag was taken down, 9 innocent lives were brutally taken by a gunman who embraced the flag as a symbol of hate. What did it take to get to where we are today? We have assembled a panel this morning to talk about where we are, where we've come from, and where we're going. Joining us now, State Senator Brad Hutto, Reverend Johnny Ray Noble, pastor of Second Nazareth Baptist Church in Columbia, State Representative Beth Bernstein, and Leroy Smith, Director of the South Carolina Department of Public Safety. Thank you all for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
Pleasure. July 2016, where are we now? What has changed?
I think a lot has changed in Columbia. I think now that after this incident, we are more open to conversation and dialogue. I think Columbia is a place now that we can have discussions about race relations and how we can come together and unify for the betterment of our citizens in our entire state.
And what did it really take to get that flag down?
Well, unfortunately, it took the death of one of our colleagues who was assassinated in Charleston, and Senator Clemente Pinckney's death is what spurred this state to action.
And I agree with Senator Hutto, because really there were no more excuses. You heard all the time, I think Senator Hutto and myself, without speaking for him, we always wanted the flag to come down, but we didn't see it as a realistic option that it would be removed from the State House grounds. And this tragedy that happened at Mother Emanuel, and when it was someone we knew and a colleague, it kind of hit home, and there were no more excuses. It wasn't just an African American issue, it was an issue for everybody, and I think people started to see it that way.
No more excuses, but it certainly took some convincing for some of your colleagues to understand that now was the time.
Well, people were basically hiding behind the 2000 compromise. When we voted in 2000 to move the flag from the dome onto the grounds, everybody said, that's it. We've done it. We've done everything we need to do. And there was just this attitude that we're not going to make any moves now. And it took something like Senator Pinckney's death to make people take a second look at what should be done.
Do you think there was a lot of unity, people coming together immediately after all of this had happened? Do you think that unity still remains, particularly in the State House?
Well, I can just say with respect to the unity, I think the grace and the forgiveness displayed by the Emanuel 9, I think that set the tone for all of us in the state.
And I want to ask you a question specifically about the rallies. There were a lot of protests leading up to the Confederate flag coming down, and even after. There was a very large rally with the KKK after that.
Yes.
What did you tell your troopers about handling all of that in a very tense moment, very emotional moment?
Yes. Well, first I won't get into the law enforcement sensitive matters discussed during that briefing, but I would just like to take you to the law enforcement briefing that we had. Inside the briefing room, I saw a room filled with law enforcement officers from all from local, county, and state agencies. Our partner is someone who we work with year in and year out. So my message to the law enforcement officers was, first, thank you for the job that you do year in and year out, and thank you for the many, many sacrifices that you make on behalf of all of us. And I proceeded to talk to them about certain things. One is patience. I asked them to exercise patience during this event because we knew that things would be tough. The participants would probably try to rattle their chains, for lack of a better word. The participants would probably abuse them verbally, so they had to be patient, they had to be calm, and most importantly, they had to be professional. I also talked to them about what was happening, and the world would be watching us. So my message to them was, let's show the world who we are. We are consummate professionals always, so let's show the world who we are. We also talked about communicating with the participants. I asked the officers, as they make their rounds during these events, to communicate, talk with the participants, so we can build a rapport with them, a good rapport with them, as well as stress the importance of remaining peaceful. And last but not least, I told the officers to be careful and have each other's backs.
And what about separating their own personal perspectives and their own personal feelings and emotions? Because we know they're not just troopers and employees, but they're human beings who have opinions about what's been going on, what's been happening. So how did you address that portion of it?
Great question. We asked them to just their opinions, their thoughts, opinion must be suppressed. Keep your eye on the mission. Stay focused on the task at hand, and that was to maintain order and to provide a safe and secure environment at the State House.
When we look at where we are today, I think many can make the argument that we're not done yet. We still have much more work to be done. So how do we begin that work, or how do we continue that work in moving forward?
With the flag being removed from the State House grounds, that was a good first step. I mean, we were on the national stage, we were in the spotlight. It was something we came together and showed unity. But we still have significant disparity in how we educate the people in this state, how we provide health care for people in this state. I mean, these are real issues that we really need to sit down and talk about. And the tragedy that happened last year was the catalyst for these kinds of conversations, but that was just the first step. I mean, Clem Pickney would want us to expand Medicaid or improve health care for the citizens of South Carolina, while the symbol of the flag coming down, we still have a lot of work to do, is the point I'm trying to make. And Senator Hutto probably, from the Senate perspective, would probably agree.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was a great first step, but we still have too many children living in poverty, too many people that don't have jobs, too many schools that are failing us. And those are the things that affect the quality of life of South Carolinians, and the things that we need to move forward. We can use the fact that we had a good feeling among everybody. There was a sense of bipartisanship, but Republicans are in control in this state, and they're going to have to take some leadership in some of these issues that we think need to happen to move this state forward.
So do you think that bipartisanship, that unity dwindled shortly after all of this happened last summer?
Well, 3 months after the flag coming down, we did have the 1,000-year flood event. And as a community, and particularly in the Midlands area, because we were one of the hardest hit and where my district, we did come together, but at a level that we haven't been quite tested like we were when the flag came down, the level of tolerance. I do think we can come together as a community and show unity, but we haven't been tested like we were with the flag. So I'm hopeful.
Hopeful and optimistic. Well, let's leave it right here for right now. We'll have much more with our panel after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Awareness. We continue with our panel discussion as we explore where we are as a state after a year of tragedy and change. We ended our last segment talking about unity and moving forward. I want to start this segment with Pastor Noble. Shortly after the Mother Emanuel massacre, we saw congregations around the nation, including Mother Emanuel, diversified. We saw people who didn't normally worship with each other coming together. We saw a greater sense of unity and even forgiveness. Do you still see that type of diversity and unity today, 1 year later?
That's a good question, because I think for the moment we saw a lot of people coming together from all religious backgrounds and faith traditions, and then after that we all went back to our corners. But the interesting thing is, I think, is that we were willing to break down the barriers that were formed right after the Civil War. The reason why there's division or was division is because it was by design. African Americans could not continue in the situation, and so it was broken that way. You worship in your place with your style, and we're going to worship over here. So it had to take something like the Emanuel 9 incident to get us to actually break down those barriers and come together. I think the momentum needs to continue. I think we need to do this on purpose. One of the movements that I saw come out of this was from the Lutheran Church. They created a program called Remix, which means we were broken together, now let's remix, let's get back together. And it starts with the young people. The young people came together, did a couple of services together that broke down this cultural barrier or whatever that we're experiencing, and it's actually working. So I think that if we continue to do on purpose things like that, and we have to do it on purpose since it was broken on purpose, let's fix it on purpose and let's be willing to do it. So I am seeing some people moving. It just takes people to want to do it, to want to do it deliberately, to make it happen.
Right, and to be open-minded enough and to have tolerance in their spirit to want to get to know somebody else who may be different from them. And bringing it back into the State House, how do you see this working in the future and moving forward?
Well, you know, we do still have a lot of work because we've need to be able to have a bipartisan way in to pass legislation that we've already talked about, but specifically, I'm going to give an example a personal example is I've introduced legislation about trying to get rid of what we refer to as the Charleston loophole, which is the gun reform and the clear background checks, and no one really wanted to hear it. I think there was a little bit of a sentiment, the flag came down, so we've done what we're supposed to do, but it was just a first step. So we really need to make sure that we continue with this energy behind working together and getting real sensible reform, particularly, you know, gun reform when it relates to the Charleston shooting.
And working together, we're talking about working with all people, and prime example of that would be shortly after or during the flag discussion and debate, and there were several protests that happened, and one in particular, the KKK rally, and you were out there, Director Smith, with all of your troopers and many other law enforcement agencies across the state. And there was one picture of you that went viral, and I think we'll pull it up. We see it right here. What's happening in that picture?
Well, I was there working the event with all of my law enforcement colleagues. It was a very hot afternoon, and I was directed toward the gentleman in the picture, and I was advised that he was suffering from some type of heat-related illness. And once I saw him, I knew that he had some serious health concerns, and that what I wanted to do was to assist him and give him the help that he desperately needed at the time. So I assisted him up the stairs. We took him inside of the State House where it was nice and cool, and from there he was treated by the fire department.
When you were told someone needed your help or needed help, did you look at race? Did you look at ideology at all, or did you just look at doing your job?
I never looked at race. I saw someone who needed help, and I was definitely going to help him. And that's what law enforcement officers do. Law enforcement is a calling, and that calling is a passion to help others, regardless of one's race, skin color, beliefs, or group affiliation.
Well, we have much more to discuss. Stay with us. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to Awareness. We've been talking with our panel about the impact of the tragedy we experienced with the Mother Emanuel shooting and the change we've seen in the 1 year since the Confederate flag has come down from the State House. As we talk about tragedy and change in our state, the events of the past week with deadly officer-involved shootings across the nation cannot be ignored. 2 black men in 2 cities were shot and killed by police. One of them reportedly made police aware he had a gun on him at the time. One shot and killed outside a convenience store in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where he was selling CDs. The other in a car during a traffic stop in Falcon Heights, Minnesota. One incident made public with cell phone video, the aftermath of the other, broadcast on Facebook Live. We do not know all the facts, and we may never know all the facts, but what we do know is what affects one can affect all. The events that have unfolded seem to repeat a story that has been thrust into the spotlight again. We cannot talk about moving forward as a state without addressing what's happening in our nation. Seeing these videos that many describe as disturbing, how do we respond to videos like this, to scenes like this?
Well, from a law enforcement perspective, I think one thing that we've done as a state, we've passed the body-worn camera legislation, which was a great tool, but it's only a tool for law enforcement. It goes beyond that. Another thing is training. Law enforcement officers have to have that use of force training. Law enforcement officers have to have that de-escalation training. We also must look at the hiring practices of law enforcement officers. Who are we hiring? Are we hiring the best? The person that we're hiring, do they have a pass? So there are a lot of things that we must look into before we give this person a gun and badge.
And how, go ahead, Senator.
I would say it's also respect. We need to have respect for law enforcement, and law enforcement needs to have respect for citizens. And that goes to training, and some of that goes to funding. I mean, I think we owe it as a state to make sure that we properly pay law enforcement officers to do the job. It's an awesome task that we give them to do, and to be able to give them that task to do, we need to properly fund them. But part of it is training, and I think the respect goes both ways, though.
And how do we respond as a community when there's a lot of hate out there, a lot of tension out there, and people who feel wronged? And how do we address the injustice constructively so we don't have situations like a Ferguson or Baltimore on our hands?
Well, if I may, we have, being an agency head, police chief, sheriff, we have to communicate with members of the public. If you want to control the story, you must tell the story. If you don't, members of the public will think that you're hiding something. So be transparent. We understand that there are things that we cannot discuss. We do not want to compromise the criminal investigation, but there are a lot of things that we can share with members of the public to show that we're open, we're transparent, so it would give them a sense of calm.
Right. A lot of people don't want to hear wait till the investigation's over and all of that. They want answers now, and they want to at least see the transparency taking place or starting to. And Pastor Noble, what do you tell your congregation seeing yet again another video like this?
Yeah, I think the message that I've always expressed to my congregation and will continue to express to my congregation is that we are human beings. Humanity is the top priority as it relates to who we are. We're not divided and shouldn't be divided among race or class, that we're all human beings, first of all, and there's a common respect that we have from our Creator that we are human beings made in his image. And so when we look at people from that perspective as God sees them, then there's a human factor, and then they become a person. The other thing is developing positive relationships with law enforcement. It's different when there's a barrier between you, but when you can name or put a face, a family, a career, hobbies with a person behind the badge, and then that person behind the badge can see you as a human being with a life and a family, I think a lot of these barriers will fall and they will come down. So getting to know one another, having town hall meetings, just coming out and meeting the officers, maybe the officers and the community working with grassroots organizations to become known so that we can develop a rapport and a relationship. I think it will do wonders with that. So I'm always telling my congregation, let's reach out to our public officials, let's reach out to our law enforcement, and let's become one big family.
Well,
if I can just,
we have to wrap really quickly,
okay.
But I'll give you 2 seconds to say it. Go ahead.
I was going to just kind of piggyback on what the pastor was saying. It's great to have the Community Advisory Council so we can partner with the members of the community. It builds and maintains an air of public trust.
Right.
Well, real quickly, I was going to say legislatively, we were the first state in the nation to pass a body cam bill. And I think that will help with the transparency and the accountability and give people a sense of ease when it comes to these situations, that there is a camera that can maybe catch what's happening.
Well, the bottom line, there is still more work to be done, but I want to thank you all so much for being with us and continuing this much needed conversation. Stay with us. We'll be right back with a final thought. As difficult and painful as the past may be, we have to tell the full story and learn lessons that can help us make better decisions for everyone in the future. We need to continue these tough topics of race and equality in a candid and calm manner that helps us address any injustice and get real solutions, not just rhetoric. I'd like to thank all of our guests this morning. Until next time, I'm Megan Norman. This is Awareness.